Hey guys, what's cracking? Coming at you with Link Joker deck profile? Shock and gasp. Yeah, so this is pretty strange. For those of you who are veterans in the channel, you know, I'm a Paladin guy. I do Paladin profiles. If I do anything other than the Paladin profile, I've usually got someone else introducing it because it's their deck, not mine. But no, this is deadass just your boy Godsman flying solo with his Glendios deck profile. Why is that? Well, there's a story behind it. See, not too long ago, right? I was just cruising around the block trying to test out decks that came out for Volume 5 and 6, or just decks that were supported by it as well. And there was some stuff that was pretty cool. Things like your boy Leopold Reverse and, you know, the chat himself, Dragonic Overlord the Rebirth being prime examples of it. Not to mention, of course, Duke and Revengers. Like that stuff don't really count, right? That stuff I just love because they're part of my deck anyway. So having tested the waters, there's not a lot of stuff that really caught my attention so much. I liked it for a bit. The Rebirth's the only thing that, you know, sort of stuck with me for a while. But I thought, hey, you know what? I completed my experiment. Why not just cap it off with Big Daddy Glendios himself? I made it as a meme deck, essentially. I didn't put a lot of effort into it at first and was fully expecting to lose. Then it turns out I go in there and I win. And then I win again and again. And holy crap, this deck, bro, it rip and tears like nobody's business. Before long, I had a crush on ye old daddy Glendios, and this is a real shocker because historically, never been a big Link Joker player. And matter of fact, if you were to ask me, there's not one Link Joker deck that I was particularly proficient in or really liked that much. Messiah's cool, I guess. Chaos Breaker, I couldn't play to save my life. Deleter's Who, so on and so forth. But nah, Glendios here, he's my boy. And after playing it for a while, I'll tell you guys, Glendios is straight heat, yo. So why is that? Why is the most gimmicky version of Link Joker arguably somehow heat, according to this man? Well, let me go ahead and explain it in today's deck profile. And if you're new to my deck profiles, let me just give you a quick rundown. It isn't just going to be me telling you what the cards are and what ratios to run, because you can see it right here. If that's all you want, it's right here. I also have a list down in the description. But my profiles are more about discussing why I pick these things and the general strategy. So if you want to learn about that, then stick around, my friends. And without further ado, let's begin. So starting, of course, with the main ride himself, here's Star Vader Omega Glendios. A instant classic when this guy came out. He's an iconic Link Joker unit. For those of you who don't know, Glendios' claim to fame is that he has a win condition. I don't mean like a really powerful effect or some sort of way to kill the... No, this is an actual legit win condition. If you get this effect off, it literally states you win the game. So, because this is a new deck, I'm going to be explaining a lot of these new cards, and Glendios is no exception. So let's go ahead and read the essay of Glendios himself. The first skill is Continuous on Van. The original power of all of your rear guards with reversing their card names become 1800. Auto on Van. At the beginning of your main phase, if you have 5 or more cards in your damage zone and your opponent has 5 or more locked cards, you win the game. Act on Van. Once per turn, Soul Blast 1 and choose a card with reverse in its card name from your drop that does not have the same name as face-up cards in your bind zone and bind it. During the opponent's next end phase, your opponent cannot put their cards face up. Auto on Van once per turn. When your unit with reverse in its card name is placed on rear circle, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, not on an additional rear circle, and lock it. Ooh, okay, so yeah, as I said, it's an essay. There's a lot of Glendios, but let me just break it down for you. Essentially, this guy is a very faithful retrain of what the original Glendios strategy was, which is you play a bunch of these reverse units here that I'll explain more, but just consider them vanillas for now. And you not only make them really beefy at 1800 to just be beaters, but you do what's known as the Omega Lock, the titular style of Glendios, which keeps your opponent's lock cards there. They don't go up. It's almost as if you play the worm deleter named Barrel every turn. It kept those face down. Now, you just have a Vanguard that in of itself does it. Now, there's a lot to love about Glendios, but let me explain the basic strategy, because the strategy is just right here. It's all on this card. It's the one and only Vanguard that you're going to be riding at grade 3. You just stay on this guy. So the main strategy is you want to achieve what's known as the triangle or V lock, whichever one you like to call it. This consists of 3 locks, both of the front row rear guard circles, as well as the rear guard behind the Vanguard. By locking down those 3 zones, you've effectively made it to where your opponent's Vanguard is isolated on the battlefield, and that's the only thing that can battle you each turn. So because the Omega Lock of Glendios is not some sort of weird condition that's only once per game or can only be happening once in a while. No, you can do this every turn. So as long as you're able to keep on dumping reverse units and then binding them subsequently with a Soul Blast, you will keep those locked units locked down for essentially the rest of the game. So of course, this deck does not win fast. It's meant to be an attrition-based strategy and make sure that your opponent dwindles in resources before it kills them outright. Now, some of y'all be like, oh, but the World End, it's got the ultimate break. You got to build up and have 5 lock cards on their field. Bro, Glendios, it just act like it don't even have this skill. It's not there. You're not going to be achieving this hardly at all. Trying to aim for this win con is going to actively lead you open to potentially being damaged to death. Because, let's keep in mind, 5 damage could be kind of tricky if at a certain point your opponent's Vanguard is all that swing, because if you're not at 5 damage already and they're swinging, they could crit you to death potentially. So it's kind of risky. You shouldn't aim for it. Essentially, 3 locks is enough. Don't care about 5. 3 is enough. So that's all you got to worry about. And it's a very, very scary deck that way. It's very effective at doing it. So let's talk about some of the supporting cast here, right? So we've got, of course, the reverse units. Now, you've got a bunch of different reverses here. Of course, for those of you who know, it could be any reverse units you want as long as they're reverse, and it, of course, doesn't have to be reverse rare. So don't be deceived by the fact that I've got a lot of these guys in their lovely reverse rare arts. That's not required. Surprisingly, someone was wondering about that. So what does matter is how many reverse units you run. This tends to vary between deck lists. I'm running 9. Now, 9 seems a bit high, right? Some people tend to run somewhere in the ballpark of 7 to 8, I think, but I run 9, and I really value reverse units. And the reason being that reverse units serve a lot of different functions. Many of them Glendios already tells you, right? Glendios tells you that they're 18k base, so they're going to be your beaters on the field. And when you call them once a turn, Glendios is going to be locking any card of your choice, which is a very, very powerful lock ability. It's potentially the most powerful lock ability we have in V-Link Joker, on par with Chaos Breaker, to say the least. I'd say it's the most powerful one because its condition is stupid easy and there's no cost to it. So yeah, that's just a very, very simple, good lock, and because of Glendios' Omega Lock, you're going to keep that there turn after turn after turn. So reverses are very important, but they're also important not just as beaters or lockers, they're also important because they happen to fuel his Omega Lock, so that's 3 parts of Glendios that need reverse units. And, as we'll go in later, there's a card that gives them shield value, so they are also defenders for you. Admittedly, reverse units you have to be careful about. There's a few things to note. This is where I need to talk about a very, I want to call it unfortunate, but we'll just say necessary rule update, where yes, you can use any reverse unit, and this includes the Rebirth. It counts. You can see it right here. The Rebirth is included. These reverse units are able to be in a Link Joker deck in both Premium and V. The catch is that from now on, as long as you put these cards in there, these reverse units do not have any effects and they lose their icons, which means that they do not get their gift marker, nor do they get their twin drive icon. So if you ride these guys, it's as if you didn't even really ride. You just got a bigger body. That's it. These guys don't get anything. They are even worse than vanillas. So whatever you do, beware about riding these things. So G-assisting for grade 3 is just not possible in this deck, really, because almost at all times you're going to have some sort of grade 3. And if it's not Glendios to ride, then you're kind of screwed. However, we got a lot of support cards that prevent that, so don't you worry your little head. Trust me, it is consistent. So the amount of reverse units is debatable, but trust me, 9 is fine. You can still plenty of times ride up to what you need to. It's very, very well made. And honestly, I think that's good enough segue to head into the next thing. Of course, just pick whatever aesthetic for your reverse units you want. I, of course, just went with the lineup of the Paladins with the cool Kagero and Narukami stuff. I've had to rep my boy Maelstrom and so on and so forth. Anyway, on to grade 2. So, starting with the new grade 2, we have Star Vader Magnet Hollow. So, Magnet Hollow has 2 effects. The first one being when it's placed on Vanguard rear, as long as your Vanguard is Star Vader, and you're able to counterblast 1, search your deck for up to 1 reverse card, and put in your hand. This is just an easy, simple +1 for any reverse card. And there's no difference between any of the reverse units. You can pick whichever ones you want. But just note, they're all important. So, this is really, really nice skill. And it's also one of the only 2 counterblasts in the entire deck. So don't worry about activating this like, oh, you're going to be CB denied. It's probably the less important one in all honesty, but it's definitely coming in clutch sometimes because the more reverse units you have, the more you're able to continue this engine going. The second skill is also very nice. It gets 5k power for each reverse unit. It's a different card name in your bind zone. Essentially, it scales with Glendios' skill. And I've seen this thing hit some pretty big numbers. I've had it like at 20k plus because of the amount of reverse units I've had in the bind zone. So yeah, it can be a very significant beater. And as is the strategy of this deck, you just kind of beat down your opponent who's only battling with their Vanguard board. You're getting 3 big swings every turn. So this is a very, very good consistency piece. Just automatic 4-up. The other grade 2 we're running, that's right, there's only 8 grade 2s, but trust me, it is consistent. The other grade 2 is Ye Olde Zirconium, a classic part of any Star Vader deck these days. So yeah, Zirconium, I'm not really going to explain it too much. Everyone knows what it's all about, right? CB1, your opponent locks a card from the top of your deck. You draw and get 10k power if it's in the back row, and he gives a crit to your Vanguard as long as they've got a locked card, and they're grade 3 or greater. It's just all the good stuff you'd expect from Zirconium. One thing to note is that Zirconium is definitely really good in this deck because unlike with Chaos Breaker, where you use the unlocks in order to just steal markers, get a draw, all that stuff, the lock that you get with Zirconium, it's going to stay there because of Glendios. That's going to not unlock. So if for whatever reason you're trying to achieve the world end, or if nothing else, just trying to make them use up their spaces, Zirconium is invaluable for that. He's just going to force them to have cards out there. Now, if their field is full, then of course this isn't going to work because it's only an open rear circle, but you're still able to usually get off a couple Zirconiums. And at bare minimum, it's giving a crit to your Vanguard, and we tend to go Force 1 in this deck. You can go Force 2, of course, but because of skills like this, I think it's better just go for Force 1 and play the beatdown game against them. So yeah, Zirconium, automatic 4-of. Also a pretty good ride. One thing to note is that excluding the reverses, everything in this deck pretty much is a good ride. So yeah, you're not really going to miss on that. It's a really cool skill. Note though that when you CB and lock their card, if you're doing it as a Vanguard, it is going to unlock before you get a chance to go into Glendios. However, that's not that bad because you can just selectively relock it with Glendios and then Omega Lock anyways. So if they're playing a dodgy strategy, they don't leave anything open on the field, then this is a good way to counteract that. So overall, good stuff. We all love Zirconium. Now, Taboo Star Vader Rubidium. This is another one of the new cards for the Glendios strategy and a 4-of. With Rubidium, she's got 2 skills. The first one being that when it's placed on the Van Circle, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck, you choose a reverse from among them and add to your hand. The second skill is just as crucial, if not even more. So it's a continuous on rear. If your Vanguard is Star Vader Omega Glendios, all of your units with reverse in its card name get Intercept, and their original shield becomes 10,000. This is insanely good. This means that all of these reverses that you have are not dead in your hand or even dead on your field. Now, after you call them and get the lock, you can intercept with them, which not only means that you got some shield value out of them, which you wouldn't gotten otherwise, but conveniently, it leaves an open circle for you to call a new reverse unit while having the previous reverse unit retired from the Guardian Circle to the drop, which means Glendios here is now able to bind it. So now we can see how this engine sort of works. We're filtering through our reverse units by searching them out, calling them, locking, using them as shield, and binding them to keep the locks going. And you just do this turn after turn after turn until your opponent gets nothing. And that's how we win. But of course, it's an automatic 4-of staple. It's not just for this effect too, it's also probably the best ride we have. It's not the only good ride we have for grade 1, but it's probably the best one because getting a reverse off top 7 is very consistent when you have 9 of these things running around. I basically never whiff this skill. There's always at least 1 reverse in the top 7. So it's just an easy peasy +1. The next one's also a +1, but that one can be Van or rear. So whenever possible, take the opportunity to get the Van Lose skill here. It's really nice. So what I would consider to be possibly the MVP of this deck, other than perhaps Zirconium, is Star Vader Worldline Dragon. Another history lesson here, Worldline Dragon was the starter for original Glendios, and they've remade it into a grade 1 a la Frontline Revenger Claudus, and they did not disappoint with this guy because he is essential. So what does this 4-of do? Well, when it's placed on Van or rear, much like with Magna Hollow, you Soul Blast 1 and discard a card with reverse in its card name from hand. You look at the top 7 cards of your deck. choose up to 2 Star Vaders in their different card names and add it to your hand. Boom! This is about as good consistency as it gets. Now, Worldline Dragon is surprisingly involved as a card, despite being what you just consider good stuff synergy consistency thing. Here's a few pointers about Worldline. First off, this skill requires you to discard a reverse specifically. So yeah, you need to have a reverse and not just any discard, so make sure that you at least have a reverse there. Otherwise, it's sort of a dead card in your hand, but that's obvious as long as you read the card. The next thing to know about Worldline is he is a really good ride, but of course, if you have the Rubidium, you should ride that and then just call this in the rear because it's still live on the rear, and you can probably also early rush with it. Another thing with Worldline is, yeah, Soul Blast when to discard a reverse to essentially get a +1. It's like a Soul Blast for a +1. That's really, really good. Thing is, though, Soul isn't the most plentiful thing in this freaking deck. As a matter of fact, there are 2 things in this deck that are going to be using Soul. It's going to be Worldline Dragon, and it's going to be Glendios. Which, yeah, because of the amount of times for Soul Blasting with Glendios' skill, it is a lot. You don't want to use Worldline Dragon more than a couple times in any given day, because otherwise you're going to be unable to Omega Lock, and if you get a turn where you can't Omega Lock and your opponent unlocks their stuff, you haven't killed them by that point, you are probably effed, dude. You just will not be able to recover from that most likely. So it is crucial that you manage your Soul Blast. Now, of course, the next card here does give you some soul here in the form of Craven Claw, but that's the only card that does it, and it's not very much. So unless you're continuously riding Glendioses, which isn't always a given, you've got to manage your Soul Blast accordingly. So only call a couple of these guys down. Furthermore, note that this guy isn't really a good beater. Generally speaking, if you want good front row guys, you're looking at your grade 2s, your reverse units. So you're going to want him in the back row. Thing about the back row is you've already got a couple of really important combo pieces in the back row. You've got Craven Claw to get the search ability and use his second skill, which is just, well, we're going to get into that. Let's just say, though, it's really important. And, of course, Rubidium, where you only need 1 Rubidium, but you should just have the 1 Rubidium out there in order to make your reverses not dead cards. So, yeah, because of those guys in the back row, World Lines, they're not quite, like, that great on the field. They're just boosters, so just be mindful if you're spamming World Lines out there that at some point or another, you're going to want to make room for other stuff. So, yeah, that is noted. But still, he is the absolute GOAT of consistency, and not only makes this deck super consistent when it comes to getting all of your rides and whatnot, it also filters out your deck really well. You're able to hit a lot of triggers pretty easily because between this, Rubidium, Magnet Hollow, and Craven Claw's searching abilities, you're going through your deck for selective Star Vader reverse units so rapidly that oftentimes in the game, by the time I'm down to 25 to 20 cards, more than half of that total is trigger units. That's quite scary in a more simplified game state against the opponent. So we do want to keep that in mind. Worldline MVP. Craven Claw. It's another staple Star Vader that has been in every version of Star Vader because it's about as good a support card as Star Vader could possibly get. When it hits or the attack it boosted hits, you peak top 5 for Star Vader, duh. But it's the second skill I really want to talk about. So if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you put it into the soul, you unlock one of their cards, and then lock a different one instead. This is so important. Not just because of the aforementioned soul that it grants you, but also because the unlocking and relocking is a great way to secure getting both of the front rows locked in one Glendios turn. Because all you need to do, right, is, let's say they have both of their front rows filled in. You lock one with Glendios, and then if they have a back row lock with, let's say, presumably Zirconium, and yes, the opponent 9 times out of 10 is going to be locking the back row because they know what Glendios does. They know that once they lock that front row, it's never coming to them again. So they are going to be enabling that as much as possible. So whatever back row they have locked, you just switch it for the front row one, and suddenly bada bing, bada boom. They don't have access to the 2 front rows anymore, and it's just down to their Vanguard now. They'll still have a booster for 1 more attack, but then shortly after, Glendios in the next turn, just call another reverse, and that's gone now. And by the time you've hit turn 4, you've already got your V-Lock win con in order. So yeah, that's a very fantastic skill. There's not a lot more to talk about Craven Claw. Automatically a 4-up for that alone. Trigger lineup is surprisingly standard. You've got your 4 Heal Guardian because early rush can devastate this deck a little bit because, again, it's very much based on attrition. So if they're rushing you too early, you won't be able to survive that easily into the long game, even if it's only down to their Vanguard swing at you. That can still kill you. Or PGs, because if they have scary Vanguards, you need PGs to be able to say no matter what. Otherwise, you're going to be playing a very stressful game most games. And then 8 crit, because who doesn't love crit pressure? So yeah, that's the basis of the deck. Starter can be whatever. Of course, I like my Control Draco Kid. Shame about Sword Child, though. Anyway, back to the overall deck analysis. This deck is a very interesting case. Of course, when you look at it at the outset, it is the most gimmicky version of Link Joker, using reverse units and having these odd searchers and the Omega Lock. It's very esoteric to what V Link Joker was like up until this point. Of course, if you knew what it was back in the day, this is no surprise. This is what Glendios always was. But for V players exclusively who didn't know prior, yeah, this is going to be shocking. Thing is, what do I think of it? Well, I love it, of course. I love it to death. Like, it's one of the funnest decks to play from the set, if not from just Clan Collection as a whole. But that aside, I also think it's a decently powerful deck. Is it better than Messiah, or is it better than Chaos Breaker? Is it better than the 2 comboed together in one deck that's been running around? It depends. See, whereas I think things like Chaos Breaker and especially Messiah tend to have more of an equilibrium towards their matchup, Messiah being, you know, like very much okay with most matchups, Glendios tends to ride or die based on what it's fighting against. It's going to have a pretty bad matchup against a lot of Excel clans because, as we noted with Glendios' skill before, additional rears can't be locked by him. So you can switch over your locks with Craven Claw over to the Excel markers, and that'll help, of course. But still, it's just that if they keep on getting Excel markers and they keep on doing that, you're not really able to keep up at an adequate rate. So it's pretty hard to keep up with that. They're able to get more attacks on you than you normally anticipate. So that is a weakness. Another weakness is Vanguard-centric decks. This goes for D-Police, this goes for Kagero, versions like Overlord specifically, so on and so forth. Those decks are going to be troublesome. Decks that remove their cards from the field very easily is going to be very troublesome, such as Nubatama or Shadow Paladins. So yeah, watch out for those matchups. But if you're not fighting any of those things, if it's like anything else, oh my god, you are going to have a fun time. Holy crap. Like, there are so many other decks that going up against Glendios, they are going to shudder because the Omega Lock is so devastating. There is not a lot you can do about the Omega Lock in reality. As long as you're a competent player, you manage your resources correctly, your opponent isn't going to be able to deny you forever. And the moment that they give you something, you will seize that opportunity, and bada bing, bada boom, it's like that for the rest of the game. That is an insanely powerful control over the battlefield. Now, I suppose another weakness of this deck to note is that despite being a control deck, it ironically also tends to feel being controlled back. Keep in mind, it's a very piece-reliant deck. Even though it has a lot of consistency pieces, basically everything that isn't a grade 3 is a consistency piece, it can still occasionally get bogged down by the grade 3s, but that's not usually the issue. The bigger issue is that when control decks try to get rid of your pieces. This is a good piece for beating. This is a great piece for giving you a crit. This piece makes your reverses have shield. This piece is great for giving you more resources and giving you soul. They pegged that up before a chance to suck it into soul. That could disrupt your ability to Omega Lock next turn. Those are all really field sensitive cards. So if they get rid of your field sensitive cards, you're going to be in a lot of trouble potentially. So watch out for that. If you're against field control decks, you might want to be very cautious about what you're throwing out to the field. But again, if it's against a matchup that isn't overtly bad, you're probably going to end up crushing them. So if you tend to like that sort of coin toss type aspect, then definitely give Glendios a try. I think that the deck is definitely a lot more underestimated than people should be giving it credit for. The deck definitely can do a lot. It's just that you need to be able to understand how to play the long game. Link Joker has always been more based on attrition if you're excluding things like Messiah, and I suppose the leader as well. But this just takes it to the next level. So if you like the more attrition type games to play, then definitely give this a try. So yeah, I'd say that about wraps it up. I used it in a recent random fight as well. So if you want to see gameplay footage of it, then do check that out. And if in a random fight in the future, I also end up getting Link Joker, or if I just happen to be on stream again, you're probably also going to see this deck because, again, I am in love with it. Big Daddy Glendios, wah, gotta love him. So, yeah, that's going to do it for today. If you guys did like this deck profile, but you have some more questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, do let me know down in the comment section below. And if you're new to this channel, then do consider subscribing. I do a lot of Vanguard content, and it tends to vary between fights, profiles, discussions, tier lists, a lot of other stuff. So, yeah, do give the subscribe and turn on the notification bell to be aware of when the next time I upload is. And with that, take care and God bless.